Hello there, my fellow London lovers, lovers of the London system. I have sad news. Our way of life, our belief system, has been ferociously attacked by an evil being who claims to have a system against our London system. A channel which goes by the name of Agadmator has published a video, The Anti-London System. Learn the ultimate defense. Now, of course, we laugh. We know that such a thing does not exist. The London system is the way of life. It has been attacked, and during an emergency meeting of the London lovers, I have taken on the task, the responsibility to answer this attack on our way. And this will be answered ferociously with the move G4. We will take no prisoners. So sit back and I will teach you how to get easy wins against the followers of this preposterous idea of there being an anti-London line. Of course, it doesn't exist. But let's get right into it and let's go from the start. So, jokes aside, decent system proposed by Agadmator, but I think it has some flaws which we should be able to expose and get some easy wins in online games. So first of all, we open d4. Agadmator has proposed knight to f6. Now, this is not good for those that play lines with d5. They can't really play the system because now they need a new opening. After knight f6, c4, they maybe struggle to transpose to their favorite system, so they need another line against the London. So knight f6 mostly will be for players that already play some sort of Nimso, King's Indian or Grunfeld, and they play knight f6 already on the first move. Second thing is, not all London players go bishop f4 straight away on the second move. Many of them do, but white can also play knight f3, and now again black needs a different system. If you try to transpose to what Agadmator has proposed with c5, you're now playing a Benoni type position after something like this. Maybe even have to play the check Benoni. If you play e5 like you mentioned in some of the lines that work against bishop f4, now you're playing the check Benoni, and well, from bitter experience I can tell you that it's not the greatest opening for black, and you have to know what to do. So if you don't play it, you've already been tricked. But okay, let's leave that aside and play bishop f4, which is what most London players do. c5, e3. So it is true that this is quite forcing, and you're most likely to end up in this position. Now, first let's look at our main suggestion, knight c3. But I will give you two suggestions, and if you don't want to watch a long video, I suggest you use the former option. So knight c3 is the main move, and here Agadmator is proposing to play a6, and I think this is to prevent white from going knight b5 in many lines. But I do believe that this leaves some fundamental weaknesses in black's position. He already has a weakness here. Now this square is also weak, and that can have a ripple effect, and c5 can also be a problem in some lines. So we will play knight c3 most of the time, but I will also give you another solution, and that is to play knight to a3. Now the reason I'm very excited for this move actually, and I think you should give it a go. So you have two solutions. The thing about this is most of the people that will follow the advice from the evil video trying to refute our London, they will not know what to do, and they will play a move such as pawn to a6. But this is already a horrible blunder, and the difference between the knight being on a3 and c3 is that now we have an extra option, knight into c4, and this is actually very bad for black. Now the best move is queen a7, which your opponent might find because there was a line in the video where black played the queen back to a7. But let's just, just so you realize how bad this is and the type of easy wins you will get. Let's say queen b4. c3. The queen is lost. No squares, this is the only square, and now we play knight d6 and simply pick up the queen. It's check, you win a queen. The queen goes back, queen d8. We take on c5, and now we see that this weakness on b6 is actually quite horrible, and this is actually counterproductive for black's position. The knight is ready to jump into b6, and we don't have time to develop. We don't have time for e6 because I will play knight b6, hit your rook, and you can't move the rook to a7 because of this. So a terrible weakness, and black struggles mightily. He has to play a move like knight c6, and here we simply develop with a great position. We're up a pawn, and black struggles to develop. The most natural way to develop allows us to jump into d6 with either the bishop or the knight. Both are good. Very good position. Finally, after knight c4, well, not finally, before we go to queen a7, there's queen c6. Okay, looks reasonable. We're covering both of these squares, and the queen can't really be attacked too badly. We can play knight e5, but queen just goes back. But here, the game is already over. d5. Again, no squares for the queen. If you go here, we give a check. Win the queen. Fine, I'll take the pawn then. But now knight e5, and the queen has to keep an eye on this. If you go to d6, the knight jumps, wins the rook. If you go to e6, bishop to c4. The knight is lost. There's no way to defend it. So you see, you can already get quite easy wins here. So the final move is queen a7. But now we take on c5. Again, this weakness is coming back to haunt black. We're threatening knight b6. He has to play queen takes e5, not to allow knight b6. But now a very strong move, e4. And again, the black squares on the queen side are black's undoing here. We're going to jump into these squares, and nothing black can do about it. The best he can do is b5. And most of these moves are only moves for black. If he doesn't play them, he's simply lost. Bishop e3, queen back, knight b6. And we have a pleasant choice. We can pick up the rook and the exchange right away, or we can play a4, which is actually the best move. So let's go back. So this is if they blindly play a6 because, well, they didn't really get any direction against this move. Only the move knight c3 was mentioned, so they might go wrong here. Knight a3, a6, knight c4, and you basically win the game. I'm going to give you a quick note on queen takes b2. Fortunately, in the aforementioned video, it was advised against playing this, against knight c3. And don't worry, knight c3 or knight a3 will actually transpose here after knight to b5. They both go to b5 after queen takes b2. So here what you need to know, and again your opponent won't play this because they're going to play this line with a6, but it's good to know a little bit about it, so for completeness sake I will include it. Knight d5, and black's problem is that the queen will actually be trapped. Pawn to a3, and a bonus, if you're playing against a really strong opponent, you can get a draw immediately by simply attacking the queen and then going back, attacking again, and the queen can't get out. But if you want to play a game, why wouldn't you? You play a3, and the queen can't get out. After a6, we play rook b1, followed by queen c1, and we're going to win the queen. Black gets the knight and the rook, but white has a queen, and it's not all bad news for black. I mean, the computer does like white here, but it's still a complicated game, and it's not as bad as Agadmator said. You can still play this for black, and it's an interesting game for both sides. Black actually more or less has to play e5 just to get the pieces out, and now we take with the pawn. And you need to know after c4 that you play queen d4. So this is about, yeah, what I'll mention about this. A quick note on instead of a6, you can actually play knight c3 for black. And you need to know what to do here for white. You need to give a check, play queen c1. And this is another line that you have to know what to do. After e5, only move for black, you take on e5. And now black at least gets the bishop, but we get the rook. And what you need to know here is to just get the pieces out. You're going to exchange off this knight. And then you try to use either the half open b file or the open d file, or to get the bishop to this diagonal, to try and help at least get a pawn for your knight. And then you'll be leading in material. Still a complicated position. Again, we have the computer on our side, but yeah, you need to know what to do. So this is, okay, some extra knowledge for you. Increasing your vast knowledge, right? So let's go back. So this is knight a3. And the only downside is, well, not really a downside. If they take on d4, we take back. And they can play this move knight d5, which would not be available if the knight was on c3. And here we just have to play a normal position. We will retreat the knight, sorry, the bishop, and then play knight c4. And it's just a normal position. You get your pieces out, and we play a game of chess. Nothing to worry about, but also no big advantage. So it's good to know about this. But I think if you want an easy solution, I recommend trying this move first, knight a3, because I do suspect that your opponent will actually go a6, having watched the other video. Okay, but now on to the meat and bones. Knight c3, your opponent will go a6. Again, if he takes on b2, we just transpose because of knight b5. So, we are looking at knight c3 and the anti-London a6. But we will attack g4. Now, what you will see here is not standard for the London system, but we want to punish black for, well, not developing, putting the queen out too early, and playing a weakening move. So we don't mind in some lines sacrificing a pawn, and actually the computer is on our side in most, if not all of the lines. So g4, what's the idea? It's a very modern move, very concrete move. We want to play g5 if given the chance, followed up by knight d5, when these weaknesses will be black's downfall. So we have options here. First, let's have a look at queen takes b2, because we always have to worry about black taking this pawn. Now we need to protect our knight, so we play knight g to e2, protect the knight. And again, black needs to worry about this threat. And he only has two moves. He has to play h6 or e6. Note that here and in most lines, if you take on g4, you lose control over d5 and you're basically lost. Black cannot allow this. This is the whole idea of playing g4. Putting pressure on black. You also don't have time to retreat with the queen. You just say, I want a pawn and I'm going back. No. You can't do that because of g5. So you have to either play e6 to stop me from coming here or play h6. So let's try e6. Here we get a very nice positional bind. We play g5. Knight goes to h5. And we play d5. And black is actually very cramped. He can get the bishop pair, take on f4, and we do get double pawns. But look at black's development. Everything is still on the back row, only the queen out. For what? One pawn? Okay, and how will you develop? Where to put the knight? Where to put the bishop? All the pawns on light squares. And this is actually quite a difficult position for black. let's see an example. Bishop to e7. It's always useful to play a4 here and a5. The queen wants to come back, and bishop d2. Note that black can almost never take this. We take with the knight, and if he castles, we have a pleasant choice. We can castle. We can also play queen d2, protect the pawn, play knight g3, but also like the move h4. We're just going for it, and why not? And still, black is struggling to finish development. And the computer is heavily on our side here. I think it's close to +2 here. So bishop e7, you could also try a move like d6 instead of bishop e7. And okay, rook b1 is also useful, bishop d2. White has a fine position. And it's noteworthy that it's very difficult for black to finish development. And all this for just a pawn. So this is very interesting. So this is the move e6. When we play g5 and take on these double pawns. This looks actually quite interesting and quite good. The other idea is to play h6. And now we take the chance to go to the half open file, rook b1, queen a3 and bishop d2. Pressure on b7. And here you actually have a choice, and again, in all of this, it's very difficult for black to find the best move. If he doesn't play the best move according to the computer, many times he's just almost lost. So like here, okay, d6 is the best move. Other moves, black is struggling. e6, for instance, d5. You keep this d5 move in mind. It's always interesting. And just to give you some ideas, let's say c4, trying to activate the bishop. We can play h4, very aggressive stuff. Bishop b4, queen d4. Just protecting, attacking. This is hanging. g5 is threatened. Black is struggling. If you take on g4, queen d4 again. We're trying to take on b8. Then this hangs. This hangs with this hanging. It's very difficult for black. So he has to find a move like d6. And now you have a very pleasant choice. You can castle, or you can regain the material and take on b7. And both seem to be fine. Computer likes the white position. I personally like castles here. And these positions seem to be very difficult for black to play. Almost always after e6 we play d5. And I mean, e6 is normal. You have to eventually get the black squared bishop out. Very non-standard positions that are difficult to play for black. And notice that we can get the knight here into h5, and this looks very promising for white. Nice pieces, we're attacking. We can add fuel to the fire if we want. Rook b3, maybe play e4 and swing it over. Many ways to play here, and once again, computer is on our side. Still difficult to develop this. We take here. So this was e6 and h6 after you take on b2. But other moves, the immediate h6 comes to mind, and it's very likely to happen. Then we play bishop d2. Again, if you take on b2, we transpose with knight g2, e2. And actually, pardon me, if you take on b2 now, it's a worse version, because we can now play knight a4, queen b4 check, c3. And the idea is this square once again. Now with the bishop on g2, there's no b5. So important detail, when you have bishop d2, there's no b5, and you can go for this b6 square. So there are many lines where the weakness created by a6 just bites black completely, and he's almost just lost in many lines. Okay, so after bishop d2, taking on b2 becomes quite bad, so let's try to find other moves. C takes d4, we now take with the queen. And this is actually a great position for white. We have 3 pieces out against none for black. Once again, black does not have time to take this pawn because of knight d5. And these squares are too difficult. We will castle queenside. If let's say they play e6 at some stage, we can play h3, defend the pawn, castle queenside. We lead in development. In some lines we can play knight a4 and hit this square. So black has to be super careful, and a very difficult position for him actually. So remember that. If you got the bishop on d2, take with the queen on d4. This is h6, bishop d2. Other lines? The immediate e6. Again, trying to stop us from playing knight into d5. In this case, again, we go with this idea of playing g5. And we're most likely going to transpose here. After knight h5, we play d5. And if they take, we directly transpose to what we looked at earlier when we play knight into e2. So this is e6, d5. Immediate e6 here. Let me check my files here. So there, e6. Yeah, so this is most likely to transpose. Maybe, yeah, after something like this, and pawn takes. Let's say black goes for something like g6. Just to show you how good white's position is. Okay, black wants to play here and castle. We go knight g2, bishop g7, queen here. You can castle or you can take the pawn. Let's say you take the pawn once again. Whoops, mouse slip happens online, but okay, let's say he doesn't mouse slip and goes queen a3. Guess what? Bishop g2. And if he now castles, we play h4. We haven't castled, so we have the h file open. And him taking on b2 actually gives us the idea of attacking the queen, maybe playing knight e4, and then going over here in conjunction with h5. Again, I think in practice, especially in blitz, a very difficult position for black. And this pawn again has a cramping effect, and these pieces are still stuck on the back rank. So very concrete and fun chess, and I think it's very difficult for black to maybe even survive here. So e6 and h6, what we looked at queen takes b2, and finally there's c takes d4, and these lines are fun. And just like when you play bishop d2, you take with the queen on d4. And again, you have a nice position if they take, very similar to bishop d2. Most likely that's going to be a move you play soon, bishop d2, castle queenside, fine position. And again, guys, don't worry about this pawn. We mentioned this many times before. Knight d5 arrives, and you're hitting him where it hurts. So once again, the most critical would be to take the pawn. We attack the queen. Play g5. Very concrete. They have to hit us here where it hurts. Knight c6, queen back to d2, and knight back to g8. If it goes to h5, and bishop c7 is very interesting. And the knight on h5 is actually, and this just one of the ways you could win a game fairly easily. If they try to develop here, play e6, you hit the knight, you take it, and here knight e4 hitting the queen, and it doesn't actually have any squares. If you go to d5, it's mined I'm gonna give this check. And I included this line just for aesthetic purposes. Knight f6, king e7, and queen d6 checkmate. Just to show you the dangers that black is facing. So there, knight h5. Remember this idea when the knight goes to h5, just to attack it and take it. And very often you can play the knight here and then take the pawn. Important lines. So okay, let's say instead of they play knight g8, but now we just go in here knight d5 with threatening knight c7. They try to counterattack, rook d1, and here black basically has to find only moves. And I did continue the line a little bit just to have a look myself. But okay, a move like this, knight b6. you can't even defend this. Horrible stuff for black. So you have to play a move like e5, which just leaves a very nice outpost for the knight here. And here bishop g3 can be played. We can also take on e5 and give this check. So many options. But bishop g3 is solid. But keep in mind, bishop takes e5 is also working. And here we just bring out the pieces, and black is struggling heavily. He has to find a way to protect his pawn. And there are always some ideas. We can flick in knight c7 at the right time. And yeah, computer has a nice edge for white here. We're gonna casual and just crash through and attack. And once again, black hasn't developed anything. So it seems like black has to be really careful in these lines. So let's go back. So g4 is our main move. And there's only one line I forgot to mention, and then we'll have a brief summary. So queen takes b2, knight g2, e2. We did have a look at h6. We did have a look at e6. So remember, if e6 we go g5 and go for this positional idea of clamping down with d5. But yeah, this is one moment where black can take on d4 and we can't take with the queen. So usually we take, in many lines we take with the queen on d4, but here we can't do it because the rook is hanging. Rook b1, queen a3. And we take with the pawn here. It might be interesting to look at taking with the queen also, but computer likes taking with the pawn here by a lot. And again, we have this threat of g5. Black has to deal with it. One idea is to play d5 and meet g5 with knight h5. And here we don't have time to take the pawn because of queen a5 check. So we play rook b3 and bring the bishop back. Notice once again that we have almost all of our pieces out. e6, you can play that, or queen d8, bishop d2. Now we're threatening to take and attack the queen, so the queen has to move. So once again moving the queen, so black has one piece out. For this we paid the price of one pawn. We do have some positional weaknesses, but our piece activity is what counts. And this is modern chess, and this is what computers like. Piece activity. And this is how modern players are starting to play. Value threats, piece activity, often over pawn structure. So here, what we can do, and this applies in many lines where the knight goes to h5. It is to attack it, play bishop f3. No choice but to defend it, and now we take. And this nice maneuver, knight f4. Hitting the pawn. Black has to develop at some stage. Now we take the pawn. And we have a very nice attacking position. Black is struggling. Well, we also have the king in the center, but black is not attacking us with anything. We have radical rooks. The rook can swing over to the king side. We can use the g file to attack. We can, depending on what black does, we have this square, maybe this square. Weaknesses on the black squares. Everything to play for, and maybe even in some lines we can swing the knight into b6. So really difficult position for black to play, and this is surely not something that you would want to face in a blitz game, and probably not in an over the board game either. So let's summarize as much as we can. d4, knight f6, bishop f4, go straight to this position. c5, e3, and they're going to play queen b6. And I gave you two choices. The easier choice is to go knight a3. And just like with knight c3, if they take here, you play knight b5, and you win the queen. You don't have to worry, you have a good position. It's complicated, but we play chess. Okay, they can bail out here with c takes d4 and knight d5. When you go back with the bishop to protect the pawn, and then you win time back with knight c4. And we have a normal position, then you just get the pieces out and castle. Okay, but you will get a lot of wins, like I said, if they go a6, which I do suggest. I strongly believe that many people will do that. After having watched the other video, there was no recommendation against this, so they're going to be like, okay, I played against knight c3, I played against knight a3. And then you hit them with knight c4. And the queen doesn't have good squares. Remember this. Queen c6, you played d5. No squares for the queen, knight e5, and he can't protect the knight. If it goes to a7, you do what? You take on c5. And remember, these key squares are black's undoing. e4 to get the bishop, and line up with the knight to take this. Another great line for white. He has to play b5, not to just completely lose. And remember, you had a pleasant choice here. So this is knight a3. So I do recommend you try that first. But I really like these lines with g4 after a6, g4. And we looked at lines where they, well, first chicken out with h6. When they go h6, you go bishop g2. Try to get quick development. If they go e6, sorry, g4, e6, you have to remember these ideas with playing d5. If they take the pawn, you develop your knight, protect your knight. And now again they have the same situation. They have to deal with g5, and it's hard to do. And once again, if e6, you play g5, and we have this cramping situation here with d5. And don't worry about these pawns. You have great potential after, let's say, bishop b7, bishop a4, queen b6, and bishop d2. You can include this if given the opportunity to do it. You should include this. Otherwise, just rook b1 is fine as well. And from here, see what black does. If he castles, you have a pleasant choice. You can play in some lines, protect the f4 pawn, play knight g3, and also simply playing h4 and attacking looks nice. And in all these lines, black is very cramped. So after taking on b2, the other option was to, one was e6, the other one was h6. Here, right? Yeah. And then you play rook b1, bishop g2. And black has to play very carefully to stay alive here. So something like this, h3. And if they play e6, you have d5 takes. Yeah, we briefly looked at that. You know, very nice pieces for white. And black has to be very careful. So yeah, this is my interesting try against this anti-London system. We're gonna play g4 and grab them by the throat and punish them for trying to attack our way of life. So remember that g4, you're going for these ideas of just trying to eliminate your opponent immediately by getting the knight into d5 and hitting him on these squares that he weakened. And again, do not worry about this pawn. You get a lot of piece activity and interesting play. Do hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you soon. Bye bye.